Tonight on Politicat, State of the Union will unpack the president's speech. Campaigning after class, we sit down with a college freshman who's also a candidate for 13th Ward Alderman in Chicago. All that and more on Politicat. It's your politics right now. Good evening and welcome to Politicat. I'm Joey Safchik. Justin is out on the slopes tonight, so let's dive into tonight's headlines. Today, the Illinois State Senate passed a measure that would raise the statewide minimum wage to $15 an hour. The bill now goes to the Illinois State House, where it is expected to pass. The legislation would slightly raise the minimum wage year by year, reaching $15 in 2025. Governor J.B. Pritzker campaigned on the issue last year after former Governor Bruce Rauner vetoed a similar law in 2017. On Tuesday, Pope Francis addressed the long-term abuse of Catholic nuns by priests and bishops, calling it, quote, sexual slavery. The Vatican clarified those comments on Wednesday, stating sexual slavery was meant to refer to sexual abuse. This is the first time the Pope has publicly acknowledged the abuse of nuns by members of the clergy. The acknowledgement shed more light on the widespread problem of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. A tense situation is developing in Washington, D.C. after Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker announced he would not attend Friday's House Judiciary Committee hearing unless he receives written assurance that he will not be subpoenaed. This comes after the Judiciary Committee authorized a subpoena in case Whitaker refuses to answer their questions or does not appear on Friday. In a letter, the Justice Department accused the committee of trying to compel Whitaker to disclose confidential information about the president. Representative Eric Swalwell, who serves on the Judiciary Committee, responded to news of Whitaker's request on Twitter, writing simply, quote, not how it works. Finally, on Tuesday, President Trump gave his second State of the Union address. The speech called for unity, but also attacked Democrats and the Mueller investigation. The president called again for a border wall, saying those who oppose him are for open borders, which is incorrect. He also called for lowering prescription drug prices and increasing infrastructure investment. Trump's call for bipartisanship created House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's now famous sarcastic clap. Now we'd like to welcome our panel. We're joined by Dominic Bayer of the NU College Republicans and Mila Jasper, former politics editor of North by Northwestern. Now, Mila, starting with you, what was your overall takeaway from the speech?
I kind of thought it felt like a non-event event. I mean, there's so much hype, especially with the conflict between Nancy Pelosi's sort of disinviting Trump from giving it at the original date to this final resolution of Trump giving the speech now. And it kind of just felt overblown. And I just thought overall it wasn't a very compelling night.
Dominic?
Yeah, I think that's very true for most of the speech. It was just Trump patting himself and his administration on the back for several very real accomplishments in the sense of deregulation, tax cuts, and the phenomenal economic growth we've seen in the last couple of years. And at the same time, propounding very incorrect, in my opinion, trade policies. But then I think the one aspect that was very revolutionary about this speech was Trump's very, very strong moral stance on the issue of abortion. On the bills we've seen coming out of New York and Virginia to permit late-term abortions. I mean, as someone who recognizes the value of unborn life, I really appreciate President Trump's comments in the speech about this issue.
Were you surprised or taken aback by those comments, or did you expect them?
I didn't know what to expect about the speech, but I really appreciated that gesture.
Anything you were surprised by?
I wasn't necessarily surprised by this, but there was a lot of talk about was Trump going to declare a national emergency to build the border wall, and he didn't. But I think that was something that people have been telling him that like he should not do yet. And so I thought what was most interesting was the way that he was calling for unity at a time when we are 10 days away from another government shutdown. And just last week he was saying that there's less than a 50% chance that he sees Democrats and Republicans seeing eye to eye on the border wall issue. So it just felt weird to be calling for unity at a time when you've openly acknowledged that we're pretty much heading towards another shutdown.
Now, the president also made several calls for bipartisanship. Did you feel that they were sincere?
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what I mean. It just seemed disingenuous to be calling for unity when you have openly staked out your position. And it's like, why stake out that position when you have set up your demands, it's like you need to either stick with them or say that you really want to call for unity and that you're willing to compromise. And with the last shutdown, he showed that that's not something that he's willing to do. So it kind of just created confusion. Like, do you want bipartisanship or do you want to stick with your principle?
Dominic, do you think that President Trump has the ability to have constructive talks with the Democrats?
I think the place Washington is right now, I don't think there's much chance of true bipartisan collaboration. I think I definitely agree. President Trump's comments were very disingenuous when he started talking about bipartisanship. But if you also look at the reaction of Democrats, of congressional Democrats, they're disingenuous about being bipartisan too, especially people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez refusing to stand up to clap when President Trump congratulated a NICE officer for his work on reducing sexual abuse and prostitution rings, especially of minors. I mean, that's just insane. That's something that in a normal year, everybody would be up on their feet clapping enthusiastically. And the fact that we see incidents like this is just indicative of the fact that Washington is broken.
So is that to say that the party divide is too deep to be fixed with this president in office?
I think with this president, this congressional delegation, there's really no realistic chance of true bipartisan cooperation on anything.
Now we know that Democrat Stacey Abrams, who lost the Georgia governor's race in 2018, delivered the Democratic rebuttal. Did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, the rebuttal is always a tough position to be in. I think that Stacey did the job that needed to be done. There are a lot of expectations for her in particular because she is an incredible speaker and she is just really charismatic. So the expectations for her were high, and I think because of those, it fell a little flat, but I don't think that is her fault. I think that it was just a poor position, and she made the best that she could out of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Stacey's a rising star in the Democratic Party who means a lot to many people. But I feel like the speech was a bit canned. It was just going down the laundry list of the things that Democrats disagree on with President Trump. So I feel like it wasn't really an invigorating, positive message.
Was she the right person for the job?
I mean, I don't see anyone else doing a better job, so.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and I also think, back to the laundry list comment, I felt like in some ways Trump's speech was also a bit of a laundry list, so they kind of mirrored each other. To me, both of them were sort of like not doing anything in particular to move the conversation. I mean, they didn't move the conversation further apart, but they didn't move the conversation closer together or in a new direction. So it was kind of a weird evening.
So Bernie Sanders also delivered his own response of sorts via social media, which garnered a lot of kind of angry attention. Do you think people had the right to be angry? Should we be using social media for those purposes?
A lot of the anger that people feel with Bernie is that he is someone who is kind of a figure in turmoil right now with the investigations about sexual assault on his 2016 campaign. So for him to do his own rebuttal when the Democratic Party picked Stacey Abrams, who is a woman, and that inflames those issues. And so for him to kind of talk over her or around her, that looks bad. And Bernie is a person who has tried to use the Democratic Party in the 2016 election, but at the same time, he's never really been a contributor or a builder of the party. And I think that this just represents that split. Bernie is a Democrat when he needs to be a Democrat, but when he doesn't feel like being a participant in the party, then he does his own thing, and that's not helpful for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I think this him delivering his own speech is evidence of how Bernie's a deadweight for the Democratic Party. I mean, he allows Republicans to depict his left-wing politics allow Republicans to depict Democrats as socialists who want to destroy the capitalist order on which our nation is built. And I think that's both harmful to the party, in addition to his policies being harmful to Americans if they were to ever be enacted.
Do you have any other major takeaways that have come up over the course of this conversation that you think people should be thinking about, maybe things in the future? He mentioned that North Korea summit.
Yeah, I don't think much is going to come out of the North Korea summit. There was a moment when the U.S. was imposing pressure, diplomatic and potentially military, on North Korea, where there was a chance that North Korea would denuclearize. But I think this whole idea of having summits and him talking with Kim and being best buddies, that's not going to solve the problem. Kim is just going to go there, meet with Trump, play nice, and then continue to advance his nuclear program without actually doing anything to solve the issues.
Yeah, and I think national security is something that Trump has tried to use for the immigration debate. But actually, some of the most interesting parts of the speech and the newsiest parts of what's going on right now were national security in the more traditional sense of the INF, which is huge news that the United States is dropping out of that treaty with Russia. And that is something that Trump has actually gotten support of, like, across the board from national security experts, and he kind of slid it in there casually into the speech. But it's a pretty big deal, because the question is, are we going to enter a new arms race with Russia? And no one has really stepped up to articulate, like, what the path forward is after dropping out of that treaty. And so that and the North Korea talks were kind of the newsiest bits of what's going on, but they were really buried.
And we're going to leave it right there. We'll be right back after the break.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
Welcome back. We have some breaking news. The Supreme Court has just decided to temporarily block a Louisiana law requiring abortion doctors to have admitting privileges to local hospitals pending other lawsuits. Chief Justice John Roberts cast the deciding vote. Justice Brett Kavanaugh will write the dissenting opinion. Abortion rights advocates argued the law would limit access to abortions in clinics. This case in particular was considered by many a litmus test for the newly packed Supreme Court. Also breaking just now, John Dingell, the longest-serving member of Congress, has died. He was 92 years old. The mayoral election in Chicago is about 20 days away, but there are still 14 candidates with their hats in the ring. Our Olivia Olander is in the studio with more on the contentious race. Olivia?
Early voting is already underway, and 4 candidates faced off in a forum on Fox 32 earlier this evening. Gary Chico, Susanna Mendoza, Tony Preckwinkle, and Willie Wilson were there. They are the current frontrunners according to the Lincoln Forum, which helped organize the event. Those 4 candidates are all polling between 8.7 and 12.7%, according to a poll by the Chicago Sun-Times. Bill Daley is also in the top 5, but did not attend the event. Given the margin of error, all except Mendoza are practically tied for first. A fourth of Chicago voters are still undecided. 2 other big names, Paul Vallis and Amara Enya, sent cease and desist letters to Fox 32. They say their exclusion will put them at a disadvantage. Enya got a lot of attention early in the race when Chance the Rapper and Kanye West threw their support behind her. Vallis has painted himself as separate from the Chicago establishment and called tonight's forum blatantly unfair to outsiders. Candidates not featured in tonight's debate will get to voice their opinions on another forum Friday night on Fox. The field has narrowed from 21 candidates running in September. Key issues include school funding, pension reform, and immigration policy. The race has also been shaded by accusations of widespread corruption involving embattled Alderman Ed Burke, the candidates all trying to distance themselves from his scandals. We'll have continuing coverage of this race as Chicago gets ready to vote February 26th. Now, back to the desk.
Thanks, Olivia. The mayoral race isn't the only one heating up this winter. Chicagoans will also vote for new aldermen to represent their neighborhoods in city council. Chicago's 13th Ward is a hotbed of notorious Chicago politics. In the region right by Midway Airport, no one has made an attempt to unseat a seated alderman since 1991. That was 8 years before David Krupa was born. Now the 19-year-old is on the ballot, running against Alderman Marty Quinn. Krupa, a freshman at DePaul, is here with me now. David, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here. So are you stressed? We're about 20 days out from the election. You're halfway through a quarter of winter quarter at school. How are you doing?
I'm lacking sleep, but other than that, I'm pretty good.
Tell me, how do you handle it?
Well, you know, you can train your body to do anything. A wise man once told me that. I've kind of learned to deal with 6 hours of work, 6 hours of school, and then campaigning on top of it. I maybe get about 3 hours of sleep, but you just cut out the sleep.
Is it worth it? Why do you do it?
I think it's worth it. I think that the thing that I'm doing with this candidacy, with this campaign, is not just an aldermanic election anymore. It's more of a movement at this point. And I'm really continuing it for the people. I'm fighting for the people of my ward and the people of the city, even the people of the state of Illinois. And, you know, it's good to know that when I make sacrifices, I'm not doing it for just myself. It keeps me driving.
Why do you think you're the man for this job? You're 19. There are probably people with more experience in the political realm than you. Why should you be elected?
Maybe there are more people who are more experienced than myself, but nobody wanted to run. And it was not their fault per se. It was more of, you know, a bad history of candidates running and then being squashed or targeted or oppressed. And, you know, I think you have to balance a little bit of political experience with courage. You know, do you have the will to stick it out? You know, I think where I lack in political experience, I make up for in the will to fight for what's right, and I think that really resonates with people. And I think that's kind of the reason that people think I'm what it would be probably the more suited candidate for alderman than Marty Quinn.
How do people react to your age? Do they think you can do it?
Yeah. I think a lot of people like the fact that somebody new, somebody young is coming into city council, going to change it up with new ideas. A lot of times when I went door to door getting signatures, people said, I'm glad that your generation is starting to step up and, you know, take control. You guys need to fix some of the mess that we've created, and I'm glad that you have new ideas. We need that.
So you mentioned those fresh ideas. Tell me about them. What are the policy issues that really matter to you?
Well, a lot of the policy issues that really matter are more of nonpartisan ones, things that help everyone. One of them being security. We're seeing a little more crime happen in our ward than usual. It's been a very quiet place up until recently. I want to work with the police department and neighborhood watch groups to get more community awareness and involvement going on and try to lower the crime, mostly theft. Property tax is another big one, and the pension crisis, that affects everyone.
How do you think college students can engage politically without necessarily running for office?
I would say go to a candidate that you agree with and canvass for them. You know, one of the things that we have a really hard time doing is raising money and getting volunteers. And I think, you know, a lot of college students like myself, you know, we don't really have that much money because we have to pay off our student loans and all that, but time is just as good as money. I say get in there and get your feet wet.
Is there anything that you want college students to know about your strategy, who you are?
Well, I would say if you can, come and try and meet me at my office, really get to know who I am. Be aware of slander politics. Slander politics is kind of consumed not just the city but the country, and people like Madigan, you know, tyrants, thrive off of it. If you look at some of the biggest monarchs and dictators we've had throughout history, a lot of them put down their opponents rather than bolstering themselves. And I think that it's important that we look past the slander politics and look more towards policies and issues. I would ask that college students be aware of that.
Well, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, David. Chicago municipal elections will be held on February 26th.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, spread for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
Now we're going to welcome back our panel for Politicat, where we talk about some of the politics stories that are taking social media by storm. Rapper 21 Savage was detained by ICE this weekend. ICE says 21 overstayed his visa, which expired in 2006. His birth certificate confirms he was born in London, though fans thought he was a native of Atlanta. 21's representative said he is never hidden from the Department of Homeland Security, and they don't know why he's being, quote, targeted. His representatives also accuse ICE of lying about 21 having a criminal record. Now Jay-Z is involved, hiring an attorney for 21 Savage and trying to help him post bail. Other rappers have shown support for him on Twitter. 21 Savage has 3 children, all of whom are U.S. citizens. Dominic, why do you think this case is getting so much attention?
Well, I think both because of the extreme popularity of 21 Savage. People always like to pay attention to news stories of like entertainment celebrities. But I think this also points out to a serious flaw in our immigration system, which is people coming in here, overstaying their visas. And I think it's one of the issues that President Trump has failed to confront with his immigration proposals. Is sure, you can build a wall that helps contain the number of people coming in via the border in the South, but what about people who come here legally and then just stay in the country and never go back to their places of origin? And so I feel like it's both the intersection between the cultural aspect and the political aspect that makes this such a fascinating case.
Mila?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and that's one of the biggest critiques of Trump's immigration policies is that they don't take into account things like people coming in through regular ports of entry, but then overstaying people, and especially with the drugs as well, people bringing drugs mostly through ports of entry, and then overstaying their visa. These are things that people are saying Trump needs to take into account when he's forming his immigration policies instead of just building the wall. So I think there's that aspect of it, but then there was also some just weird nuances to this story about 21 Savage in his lyrics being critical of the current administration and ICE itself, and so it just feels like a weird thing for this happening now. And then there was something else about 21 Savage being arrested before, but this not coming up, and people were confused why it didn't come up then, but it just hadn't been an issue until now, and so it feels really random.
Moving along, why do you think other rappers, such as Killer Mike and Jay-Z, have expressed their support for 21?
I think that because immigration is such a hot button issue, people just want to make sure that they have their name out there as being on either side of the line, and it's pretty clear where these other rappers have stood in the past, and so it's sort of a show of solidarity is all I can take from it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that's a big part of the story. It's the political aspect with many people on the left opposing deportation and seeing it as kind of an immoral issue. So that definitely plays part of it. And part of it is also like this is a member of the rap community and they feel some sort of connection to 21 Savage, which leads them to speak out in his favor.
And next on Politicat, Senator Ben Sasse is receiving hostile fortune cookies from an anonymous source. The Nebraska Republican tweeted a photo yesterday of that little paper slip reading, quote, "May the afterlife turn out to be a series of never-ending Fox News interviews." In a follow-up tweet, Sasse said another cookie hoped that he would be, quote, "trapped in an elevator with someone who was angry at him." Sasse said he gives the sender props for creativity. Mila, Ben Sasse has more than 250,000 Twitter followers, and this was retweeted 1,200 times. Do you think there's a relationship between a politician's popularity on Twitter and their electability?
There definitely is. I think ever since the Obama election in 2008, people, and mostly 2012, when that really took off, it took off in between those two elections, is when social media really became important. And now Ben Sasse is pretty good at Twitter, and now figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are kind of showing that if you really want to be in the news, which is critical if you're a politician to getting your ideas in front of people who are voters, then you really need to be on social media and not just tweeting about policy or your specific stances, but like making people-to-people connections. And I think that's actually pretty nice for politics because not everyone is someone that you can go and knock on their door. And so being able to forge a personal connection on social media is kind of helpful if you are a voter, but also as a politician, it means you have to be really on top of your game and in the know.
Yeah, I think definitely your ability to connect with voters and the general public on Twitter plays a big part in how people view you and the popularity of your political positions. I think Ben Sasse, I definitely deeply admire him for his positions in favor of a traditional vision of conservatism in the face of kind of ethno-nationalism and populism that's ascended within the Republican Party. But even more than that, it's his Twitter shows that he's such a decent and a funny guy. He's real. And I feel like Twitter really gives politicians the opportunity to kind of craft that image that makes you connect with them on a level that goes beyond just your policy agreement.
Do you think that this was an effective way for the constituent to reach the senator?
I feel like the message that the constituent conveyed deferred from the way that Sass took it. Sass just got a laugh out of it and used that to his own advantage. I feel like the constituent was using it to kind of bash him and try to be rude because of his past political positions.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even necessarily know if we can say that, because if you are willing to put a message inside of a fortune cookie, then that tells me that you're really not actually taking this seriously. And I mean, that's okay, but like you said, Sass turned it into his own moment, which if you're a politician, that's a good sign that you are on top of it, and you're going to be able to connect with people. And that Twitter is a litmus test for are people going to see you as a person, or are people just going to see you as a figure and either vote for or against you just based on heuristics?
Well, it's time to say goodbye to our panel. Mila, Dominic, thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
This racist photo from Virginia Democratic Governor Ralph Northam's medical school yearbook page has thrown the state into chaos. As you can see, the photograph from 1984 depicts one man wearing blackface and another dressed in the robes of the Ku Klux Klan. Initially, Governor Northam made a statement acknowledging he was in the photo and apologized. Despite calls for his resignation from the Virginia Black Legislative Caucus and presidential hopefuls Julian Castro and Kamala Harris, he said he wouldn't step down. The next day, Governor Northam held a bizarre press conference walking back his earlier statement. He said he actually wasn't in the photo, but admitted to dressing in blackface for a different party as part of a Michael Jackson costume. Northam added he won the costume contest and offered to moonwalk for reporters, after telling the room how hard it is to get shoe polish off of one's face. Northam, who governs 1.5 million Black Virginians, still refuses to resign. Virginia places a one-term limit on governors, so he couldn't run for re-election in 2022, even if he wanted to. Now follow me here. If Northam were to resign, next in line for the governorship would be Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, who was accused Wednesday of sexual assault by Stanford University fellow Dr. Vanessa Tyson. Tyson alleges the assault took place at the 2004 Democratic National Convention in Boston and has hired the legal firm which represented Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Fairfax has hired the legal firm which represented Justice Brett Kavanaugh in his confirmation battle last year. Fairfax, who denies the allegations, has said little about the possibility of taking the governor's office. If Fairfax doesn't get the job or steps out of the running, Virginia Attorney Governor Mark Herring would be next in line. He also admitted to wearing blackface at a party in the 80s and apologized for it Wednesday. Now, assuming he doesn't get the job either, the fourth person in line for governor would be House of Delegates Speaker Kirk Cox, the leader of a 51-50 Republican majority, who only came into power because of a coin toss last year after a special election ended in a tie. Well, we've physically run out of monitors, but we think it's important and telling to also mention that Virginian State Senator Tommy Normant was one of the editors of a Virginia Military Institute yearbook from the 1960s, which also featured racist language and students in blackface. So, what have we learned? It appears that journalists and constituents need to check out yearbooks. In a few years, social media will surely make this a less daunting task. But for the time being, we need to look at the records we have. these future politicians were old enough to know the consequences of their actions and appearances. This is not dancing on a rooftop, it's outright racist. In the future, it's imperative that these things come to light well before someone takes office, and it's our job as reporters and dutiful citizens of democracy to ensure the public knows who they're electing. That's all the time we have tonight. I'm Joey Safchik. From all of us here at Politicat, thank you for watching, and good night.